Well, I don't want to pretend that I know anything about superheroes at all. And so I want to try to fake it this morning. The reason for that is that I grew up without a television in my home. My dad called it a one-eyed monster. And it was never going to be found in Willie Hastings' home ever. And so I didn't get to watch a lot of TV at all. I grew up where all young boys should grow up, and that is outdoors, right? In the wild, and I had my catapult, and later on I had my BB gun, and I was out there shooting the wild animals, like these little lizards and frogs and stuff like that. And my dad said to me, "John, never, ever do you shoot one of them harmless birds. The wee birdies in the tree, you never, ever shoot one of those." And of course, that's all the challenge that a 12-year-old boy needed, right? And so I shot these little harmless birdies. I've repented so much about that to this day. But that was like out in the wild, man, in the Rhodesian bush, the Savannah land. It was stunning. I longed for it every day of my life. It was so great. But one day, I decided that I was going to shoot one of these little birdies that was in our yard. Now, we had a fairly big yard, so it wasn't a huge risk, like 2 to 3 acres, big yard and a lot of trees and stuff. And I shot this bird, and it fell down to the ground. I didn't realize my dad was watching. He was over there. I tell you, that was a day that I wished for Superman to come and rescue me, because he applied the Board of Education to the seat of learning, and it was hugely painful. I thought that was the end of my life. But I did watch a little bit of TV, and about once a month my parents would let us out and go to our friend's house next door, and I'd watch Batman and Robin. That was the first superhero I remember. Avenger comics and that didn't exist in my day, at least where I grew up. And later on, I did become aware of Superman. I did watch some of the movies, but by that time I was a teenager, and I was way, way more interested in Lois Lane than I was in Clark Kent, and I would just, with a kind of teenage infatuation, just go and watch Superman, the weekly thing or the movie, just to see a bit of Lois Lane. That was much more appealing to me, because I was always kind of the science, down-to-earth guy, and all this supernatural stuff that Superman did was just kind of weird. I know it didn't exist. But somehow we just sat there all the way through those Superman movies, knowing that he's going to save the day, but we still wondered whether he was, right? And so the real heroes are perhaps the movie makers, who can make you sit there in suspense for 2 hours, wondering whether he's going to save the day, and he always does, but he's going to do it. But this whole idea of superhero and Superman is like way out there somewhere, and we're totally removed from it. Like, how many of us are going to save the planet? We're going to save the planet, save the city, save the nation, whatever. We're not going to do that. So superheroes are a little bit far removed from us. So Andy Stanley last week, he brought it down to earth for us. And he said, no, we need to consider what God says about what a real hero is. And we all have access to this, that it's very accessible. All of us can be superheroes in the mind of God. All we need to do is follow his basic command, and that is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and love our neighbor as ourselves. So love God and love your neighbors in the same way. And a real neighbor, like the Good Samaritan, the story he told, incredible story, he said that a Good Samaritan, a real neighbor, is somebody who sees the need and meets it, who finds out the price and pays it. And that's what we got to do. And every single one of us can do that. But we still don't. I know I don't. I don't do it every day. I'm not even sometimes looking for opportunities. I'd rather just be myself, and swim in a new swimming pool and do that sort of stuff and just exist and have fun. But I'm not looking every day to be a great neighbor. And when the opportunity comes along, I also shy away from it, because I think there's a deeper a sense that all of us have as we look at these things that perhaps prevent us from being the neighbors that we should be and fulfilling those opportunities that God brings along our way. And that is a sense of inadequacy. We all have fears. Our biggest emotion is fear, and that prevents us from doing things. But most of the things, the opportunities that God provides for us are not fearful. You know, they're not dangerous things. Sometimes they may be, but most of the time they're not. They're just neighbors who need some help. There's people down the road. There's people in the church. The church has an issue. The nonprofit has an issue. You know, there's all kinds of things around us all the time where we can meet their needs, but sometimes we don't. And for me, most of the time, it's because of a sense of inadequacy, that I don't have what it takes actually to meet the need. And if I did anything, it wouldn't actually look very good. It wouldn't look amazing. And I don't want to, you know, just look like that and imperfect. And so I don't do these things that I should, because I feel like I can't really do it properly. And you think, well, John, how on earth do you feel like that? You look so confident up front here and all that sort of stuff. You know, how did you feel like that? And I think all of us do. If we, you know, we present ourselves as in this macho image, and we're all Americans, and we're yeah, and we've got it all together. But inside, we have this sense of inadequacy that we really don't have what it takes to do the job well and to do it properly. You know, and I thought about my life and thought about what was the things that really compounded that feeling in me. I think we all have it to some certain extent, but there may be some things in life that compound it and that drive it in until your feelings of self-worth and the value of your contribution just degrade and dissipate into almost nothing, and then you just live life by yourself. You know, if I can just get through life, that'll be it. You know, never mind everybody else who needs some needs met. And so what it was for me was a very, very star older brother that I lived in the shadow of. I mean, this guy was incredible. He's 2 years older than me. He excelled at everything, you know. And we had the similar interests. There was always this competition, right? We were interested in rugby and cricket and soccer and in girls. And neither of us were very good at the last one, but he excelled at all the other ones, right? And the thing about it was that in his year, he just landed with the luck of an Irishman. He landed in the year where they had all the best players. And so he played for the unbeaten rugby team in the nation. He played for the unbeaten soccer team in the nation. And not only did he play for that team, but he was the best. Okay, and I can remember to this day my dad telling this story at David Livingstone School there in Salisbury, Rhodesia, and it was the finals of the national championship, and it was my brother's school against this other school, David Livingstone School, and my brother's team was 100 times better than this other side, but they could not score a goal. The reason for that is because the goalkeeper of the other side was absolutely amazing. He saved everything. They shot 40 times at him. The other team didn't even shoot once, not one shot at goal. They shot 40 times. He saved every single one. Now, if you're a soccer follower, you know, you may remember a guy called Bruce Grobbelaar who played for Liverpool Football Club, you know, one of the most famous clubs in the United Kingdom, and he was their star goalkeeper for 15 years. That was this little guy. That's where he ended up. Until about 5 minutes before the final, my brother came up to him, jinxed past him, and put it in the goals. And everybody roared. And then he did it again. Twice he did it. You know, my brother was the absolute star. And my dad talked about it all the time. Every single time we had guests over. Oh, did you hear about Ross? You know? And so I'm this little younger brother growing up behind this amazing star. And he excelled in those sports. He excelled in academics. And he went through, did his bachelor's, his master's, his PhD in chemistry, a leading university in Canada. You know, then he decided the Lord was calling him into ministry, kind of like me, and he went off and did a master's in theology, and then he did a PhD in theology. So this is now Dr. Ross Hastings, a PhD in theology from St. Andrews University, which is the top theological school in the United Kingdom. He defended his thesis at Cambridge, blah, 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 blah. All right? I don't hold any of that against him. He's a great guy. He was just living his life out to the full with what God had given him. It was amazing. But I was coming up behind that. And I was actually quite good. I was also captain of the soccer team. I was also quite high up in the academic world. But I didn't think I was good. I thought I was terrible. I thought I just couldn't match up to anything that's gone before. So my contributions were just paled into insignificance. You know, and then he started writing books. Right? And I want to give him a shout out today because this week he won the Canadian Word Guild Award in Toronto, he lives in Vancouver, for the best academic book in 2017. It's called Echoes of Coherence. Now, I know that 99.9% of you right here don't even know what coherence means, right? So let me tell you, that's the whole book. So take your dictionary with you when you read this book. But it's actually a brilliant book, right? And how there's cognitive harmony between Trinitarian theology and science as it's unfolding today. If you're in science at all, you should read that book. But that's my brother. And everybody says, John, when are you going to write a book? I said, I'm not even going to try. I mean, my contribution just won't be that good. You know, and so you live with us in the shadow of somebody like that. And we can compare ourselves with all kinds of people, and we just feel like, you know, even though in reality what we can offer is quite good, we feel so inadequate about it. And we think, wow, if we do it, it's just not going to look that good. It's worthless. Nobody really is going to appreciate what I'm going to give anyway. And then there's failures that happen in your life, and those can really drag you down and think, oh, I'm a useless individual. I can't really offer anybody anything. You know, and I actually was quite good at academics, you know, and I did pretty well at school, and well enough to get a full scholarship paid by one of the top accounting firms in Johannesburg, full scholarship to study accounting at the university. And so I started, and it was horrible. I hated accounting from day one. Every single part of it absolutely was the worst subject I could have ever chosen. In those days, they didn't even offer it at school, so I had no idea what I was going into. My dad just said, oh, John, just become a chartered accountant. That's a good thing, you know, and that would have been, you know, valuable in his sight, and so off I went. It was horrible. In those days, the whole year, you know, the value, your grade was based on one, like 5-hour exam at the end of the year, and that's it. No cumulative assessment. So I just had to wait that year out. It was horrible. I couldn't give the scholarship back. I couldn't talk to my parents about it. You know, nothing. It was horrible. And the inevitable happened. And that day, my father disowned me. He really did. He said, John, you're no longer part of the Hastings family. You know, but he didn't mean it. And I love him, and I've forgiven him, and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, those type of things happen, and they happen in all life. They may happen in your marriage, they may happen in your business, they may happen in projects, and you fail. And you think, man, I'm a failure. What contribution do I have to make that is valuable to anybody? And I think we all of us have a propensity to feel that way. So how do we get over it? How do we move out of that? Because we have to. We have to in order to fulfill God's plan for our lives, because God is going to bring us opportunities, and they're going to be outside of our realm of comfort probably, and he's going to say, I want you to do this, and we're going to say, maybe not. You know, I'm not sure I have what it takes to do that, or if I even try to do it, it's not going to look so good, so why even try? Or perhaps our best one is there's somebody else who can do it. You know, there's somebody else who's going to be able to give that money. There's somebody else who's going to be able to give that time. There's somebody else who's more experienced in children's ministry. There's somebody else with more Bible knowledge. There's somebody else. Somebody else is going to do it. We're great at discovering that there's probably somebody else who's going to do this thing, and the Lord maybe wants us to do it, because in fact he does want us to do it, because that's the way we grow. We grow in faith and with works. James spends a whole book talking about that, because as we grow in our relationship with God, he provides us for opportunities to show the love that he's put in our hearts towards other people. That's the way we work it out. And as we do that, we actually grow in confidence with God, with Jesus, and with ourselves as we accomplish those things and meet those needs and find the price and pay them and do all those things that God brings to us to do. That's the way we grow as people. And in this church, we're all about a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And so how do we get over the sense of inadequacy and move past it and fulfill what God wants us to fulfill? Well, I love the stories of Jesus, because they're all about meeting talking to us where we're at. There's an amazing way of diving down into our souls and meeting those questions that we're asking. And so there's an incredible story in Matthew chapter 14 that describes how he got the disciples past the sense of inadequacy that they had. Matthew chapter 14, verse 13, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So Jesus was actually in mourning here. That's why he wanted to be alone. You know what he'd heard? He'd heard that John the Baptist, his friend, his ambassador, this guy who lived his life to prepare the way for Jesus Christ, had just been beheaded by Herod. It was awful. Jesus wanted to be alone. He wanted to mourn. And so he withdrew by a boat and tried to find a solitary place. But the crowds, they didn't care. They wanted Jesus. They wanted more of Jesus. Jesus was bringing stuff that they wanted. They wanted to be with him. And so the rest of the verse says, hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. They perhaps didn't know that Jesus wanted to be in mourning, but they definitely wanted what Jesus was bringing. He was bringing it in the most amazing way. Because look at verse 14. When Jesus landed, the crowd was there. Now, if that had been me, I want to mourn. I've had something terrible happen. Leave me alone, please. You irritate me. Get away. Not Jesus. Jesus was filled with compassion, filled with love, filled with tenderness. Man, I can't believe it. And so here they are, thousands of people following him when he wants to mourn, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So Jesus is illustrating to us, look, there's going to be needs. They're going to be out of your comfort zone. It's not going to be comfortable right now. When I bring you a need, it's not going to be comfortable for you. You're going to have to go out of your way to do this. And Jesus showed us by example, he's willing to go out of his way. He wanted to be alone, but he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Wow. Imagine being alive then. I mean, imagine having a child that was sick from birth, that was lame from birth, that was blind or something like that, and you heard Jesus is healing these people instantaneously. He just puts his hand on them and it's done. Imagine, I tell you, I would have been there with the crowd. I wouldn't have cared what Jesus was going through. I wanted the touch of Jesus in my life, and that's what they wanted. And so he was healing their sick. And as the evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Well, we're logical people, the disciples. I mean, we've assessed the situation already. We have a big problem. It's a big challenge. We have a big crowd, thousands. They're very hungry. This has gone on all day. It's evening time. There's no Ingles. There's no Publix. There's not even a 7-Eleven. All right? They have no food. They have no money. Let's avoid the problem by getting rid of it. Let's just skirt around it, like we like to do. Let's avoid the problem. And that's our first response often, is just like the disciples. We got it figured out. We're Americans. We understand business. The business doesn't work right here, so let's just put it aside and move on, right? And that's what they wanted to do. And so they acted impulsively. Instead of inquiring of the Lord, which is always the best thing to do, believe it or not, is to stop and inquire of the Lord and not to act impulsively or based upon our immediate logical conclusion of what is going on. All right? So they didn't inquire of the Lord. They just wanted to evade the problem. This was too big of an opportunity for them to meet. But the Lord, he, of course, had a different idea, because he loves us and he wants us to grow. Right? He wants us to grow in confidence in ourselves and with him. And so what did Jesus say? Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away." Really? I think they do, the disciples said. No, they don't need to go away. You, Andrew, James, John, Peter, you, just give them something to eat. Man, Jesus, you haven't checked out the problem. This is a bigger problem than we can handle. And, we don't have money. We've given up our jobs to follow you. This doesn't work, and it doesn't compute in our brains. I mean, you don't even have to go to Harvard Business School to figure this one out, that this is a problem that is beyond our capacity. But Jesus says, no, you, feed them. And that's what God does. God comes to us and he invites us to do something, right? It could be just as simple as helping out a friend. It could be, taking our friend for coffee, looking after a friend's kids when she's sick, or, it could be a whole host of things. Getting involved in an organization, getting involved in Wombleland, Upstreet, guest services, all opportunities to come away, get involved in giving to the church at this time, or giving to a nonprofit, or giving to somebody's mission trip, or going on a mission trip. The opportunities come up to us all the time, and God says, here it is. And we say, nah, I don't think so. I don't do that type of stuff. I mean, I'll pray about it. That's a great way we avoid things, right? We'll pray about them. It sounds so spiritual. I'll pray about it. I'll pray that God brings the right person for you. I'll pray that God brings the right resources, and those rich, generous people, that are out there somewhere, I pray that God will bring them. And we look for those other people. And I'm also a great networker. God gave me a mouth. I can tell other people about it. The Lord looks at us and says, no, I want you to do it. You, not somebody else. You, I want you to do it now. And we respond, as the disciples did, with some excuses, within the confines of our limitations that we can only really understand. And so they start to say a number of things to the Lord. This is one. We have here only, say only. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Like we said, you don't have to go and have a Harvard MBA to figure out 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, 5,000 people. Does not work. Jesus says, only is not in my vocabulary. It doesn't exist. And you should know that, actually, because I'm the infinite one with all resources. So only doesn't exist. It exists in your vocabulary because you want to, most of the time, exist within the confines of your own inadequacy. That's where you want to live because you think that's where you'll be comfortable. But you know what I know? I know the unhappiest people are those that live in the confines of their own inadequacies. Those that live outside of them and keep doing these things that God provides beyond their capacity, walk with God and see Him work, they're the happiest people. But the disciples were living in the confines of their own inadequacies and limitations, and Jesus had to bring them out of it. So He takes them through a little pathway, illustration, how to move past your own inadequacies. And so this is what He says. Bring them here to me. That's what I want you to do. Bring them. What? The 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Just bring them to me. So stage number 1. God wants you to bring what you have, not what you don't have. He knows what you don't have. We're all about the onlys. Lord, I only have limited experience with children. Lord, I only have limited Bible knowledge. Lord, I only have limited time. Lord, I only have limited patience. Lord, I only have. We're full of the onlys. We're full of the onlys all the time. And we've even made it smart to exist within the onlys because that's realistic, right? We only have these things, and Jesus says, I don't care, right? I know. I'm not dumb. I know what you have. I know what you don't have. I just want you to bring me what you have. All right? Just bring what you have right now. Don't look anywhere else. When the Lord brings the opportunity, just bring me what you have. And so then the Lord does this, and He directed the people to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish that the disciples had now brought to Him from this little boy who had these things, and looking up to heaven, He gave thanks, and He broke the loaves. Then He gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. So what did Jesus do with this offering? So we bring just what we have, 5 loaves and 2 fish. It looks tiny, but Jesus says, it's fine. It's great. It's usable. It's acceptable. Whatever you have, just bring it. They brought it. He blessed it, put it back in their hands. Said, now go and start to give it out. Just this bit that you're going to have. Now imagine, 12 disciples, 5 loaves, 2 fish. He's divided the bread like 5/12. You have a 5/12 piece of loaf of bread in your hand, and you got like a 1/6 piece of fish. That's what you got in your hand. That's the disciples looking at this and saying, this doesn't even feed me. I'm a grown man. You know, half a loaf and a little bit of fish. The Lord says, start with what is in your hand. That's where He wants us to start. He wants you to bring what you have to Him. He wants you to start with what is in your hand. That is an act of faith, and that's the economy of God. That's how we operate with God. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Without faith, it's impossible to walk with Jesus. Without faith, it's impossible to grow in our relationship with Jesus. It's always going to be an act of faith when we do things for God. It's going to be bigger than us. It's going to be beyond us. It's going to be beyond what we think our inadequacies are. But Jesus says, no, just take what is in your hand and start to give it out. And we go forward, and we obey, and we trust Jesus. And so what happened? Verse 20, they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Now get this. Each of the disciples started with how much? Like half a loaf of bread and a little piece of fish. And now they've fed 5,000 people and they've got a basket full each. Wow, that's amazing. So here's step number 3. Step number 3 is when we do what only we can do, Jesus does what only he can do. But he wants us to bring what only we can do. He wants us to bring not more than we can do. He wants us to bring exactly what we have. Start with what is in our hand. And when we do that, he'll start to do what only he can do. And what happened? Huge, huge miracle. Amazing. He multiplies the little piece that we have, and he multiplies it to the blessing of many, many people. It was a life-transforming experience for everybody, for the disciples, for the little boy, for the 5,000 who got fed. It was a completely life-transforming experience that hung in the balance of them being obedient to Jesus and meeting this opportunity that they had in front of them. And so step number 4 is as we operate with God and as he does what only he can do, as we do what only we can do, he provides the rest, and we grow in our confidence in God and in each other and in ourselves for what God is able to do through us. And so in summary, here it is. This is the pathway to becoming a hero. Jesus invites you. He may be inviting you today. You know, it's something as simple as being baptized. He wants you to come forward, be baptized, join a group, become a leader of a group, serve in a department, serve in guest services, serve in Womberland. You know, give to the church in our time of need. Give that money to the ministry. Give it to a nonprofit. Give it to wherever your need is, wherever it's coming to you. You know about it. The Lord has probably nudged your heart about it over the last few weeks. And so Jesus invites you. He doesn't want you to bring what you don't have. He wants you to bring what you have. And then Jesus brings what he has, and your confidence grows in him and in yourself. And then we repeat steps 1 to 4. And that's life with Jesus. That's how we grow in our relationship with him. Now imagine again what hung in the balance of the disciples not doing what Jesus asked them to do at that point in time. What hung in the balance for all those people, for that little boy, but what hung in the balance for the disciples themselves who were the ones who needed to be obedient and to meet the need? And where Jesus said, you just take what's in your hand. And they saw him multiplied in amazing ways. What hung in the balance? Well, I tell you, their confidence soared as a result of that experience, because the very next thing that Peter did was walk on water. You know that? Right after this, it says immediately they got in a boat. After the crowd had disobeyed, they got in a boat. They were going to the other side and through the night and whatever. And Jesus comes walking on the water. Remember the story. And you know what Peter says? Peter's confidence is so high that he says, Jesus, invite me to walk on water. And Jesus does, and Peter's out of the boat, right? Because his confidence had grown so much. What is it that hangs in the balance of you taking the opportunity that God is presenting? You have no idea. You have no idea. I can tell you, I'm going to tell you a story as we close up today of what hung in the balance of a decision that I made in 1980. And I tell you, I had no idea what hung in the balance of that decision. And it seemed, it's so small as we look back on it. But in 1980, I met this blonde bombshell from America called Becky. She walked into my little church in Lakeside in Cape Town in South Africa and sat on the seat in front of me. There's only like 30 people in the church, so it was very, very noticeable that this American family had arrived. And her daddy was a doctor for CDC, and he was doing some research on some viruses at the University of Cape Town Medical School. And he was there for 6 months, so he brought his family. And lo and behold, there she was. And so I got my confidence up, and I talked to her. As introverted as I was, that was difficult to start with, but I talked to her. And I had very little to do at that time because I just graduated and was looking for a job, and she was like, just on holiday kind of for the first couple of weeks. She was there, and they lived on a little cottage right on the beach, and so I was there a lot. And but we talked to each other, and you know what I was projecting myself as? I was projecting myself as a real hero of the faith. I was one of these disciples of Jesus who would do anything to follow Jesus, and this is the way I was projecting myself to her. and I think I had the desire in my heart, but it was all about the big things of life, that I would become a missionary doctor to, Zambia. Yeah, I'll do that, if God invites me to do that. But I was a bit of a fake. And so, I wasn't really out to impress her very much, because I decided by that time I didn't need girlfriends in my life. I just wanted the one I was going to marry, and that was it. So I was praying about that. I didn't try to impress her. We didn't go on a single date. Didn't take her to a restaurant. Didn't have a car. Didn't have a car to impress her with. All right, so off we went to the beach, and we had the Bible, and we opened it, and then I took her to church meetings. So we went to this church meeting on Wednesday night, and this Irish preacher, and he was like, whoa, how Irish preachers do it. And we were all like convicted, and yes, we're going to be disciples of Jesus. We're going to do anything he asks us to do, And Becky and I prayed at the end, and that was it, And then a friend invited us over to hang out afterwards. And so we were hanging out, and this is they were a little bit older than we were. And we were like 20, 21 that stage. These people were probably in their early 30s. And Gordon and Jenny were their name. And we're sitting there, and the phone rings. Now, remember, at that time, it was like one phone in one house, in the bedroom, somewhere like that. And so he runs through to the bedroom, answers the phone, and then he comes back, and he's looking all worried. So, what's the matter, Gordon? He said, man, I just got a call from somebody. He's supposed to speak at the camp that I'm running this weekend. Now, this was Wednesday. The camp was starting on Friday. And this was a camp that he was running. And Gordon and Jenny had the most incredible children's ministry ever in Cape Town. I mean, they had this Friday night club. They had 100 kids between 8 and 12 that were there every single Friday night. They were phenomenal. And so he was running this short weekend camp at a beautiful little campsite in Cape Town called Froggy Pond. And he was going to be there from Friday to Sunday. And the speaker who was supposed to speak, his mom had died. It was something serious. And he couldn't speak. So we're sitting there, and Gordon looks at me and says, John, will you do it? Didn't take me but 2 seconds. No. There is no way in the world that I'm going to do that. I mean, I only have limited experience with speaking before children. In fact, I have none. Right? I've never spoken in front of children. Plus, I only have limited experience when it comes to acting and clowning around in front of kids. I mean, I can't keep their attention for more than 30 seconds, never mind 20 minutes, right? There is no way in China that I am ever going to take this opportunity. Thank you very much. I mean, I didn't say all those words, but I was very categorical with my no. And, well, he said, sorry and whatever. And it was okay till about 30 minutes later. And I'm in my old green Beetle with Becky next to me and driving home. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I wanted to start getting romantic, She wasn't about to get romantic. I found out very quickly that this was a young girl who did not mind speaking out what she was thinking. And actually, that's why I love her. Because I just don't have the patience to wonder about what people are thinking, right? They must just tell me. And so she told me. And she said to me, John, you've been telling me you're this, avid disciple of Jesus Christ. You're a hero in the faith. I didn't use those words, but I was projecting myself in that way. And she said, and here you get one opportunity to do something for Jesus, and you said no. I cannot believe it. Whew. I didn't admit it at the time that I was wrong, of course. But later on at night, after I dropped her off, it was kind of a somber ride home. And I got on my knees before God, and I said, you're right. She is 100% right. There's 2 stories that I know. One is called Billy the Bully, and the other one's called Proggy the Froggy. Those are the only 2 children's stories that I know. You know what he said? Bring him. Bring him to me. I said, okay. I'll bring you those 2 stories. That's it. Those are my 2 sermons for this children's camp with, 100 8 to 12-year-olds, and that's what I'm going to do. So I got up there in fear, trepidation. First day, told them about Billy the Bully, but the gospel was in there. And I was like, I'm going to pray now. So after about 15 minutes, I'm going to pray. I expected the kids, when I said amen, to just run out the door with a clatter of chairs, because they'd been promised a swim at the beach and some ice cream or something like that, right? It's like, they're not even interested. But I did have the boldness to say, just before I prayed, I said, if any of you want to trust Christ today, just come forward when everybody goes. And I'm telling you, I said amen, and there was just quietness in the room. Not a kid was moving. And not one, not two, 17 kids came to the front and trusted Christ. And here I am. I never led a kid to Christ before, ever in my life, And I got 17 of them, I said, Becky, come here, And she was actually new in the faith. She had no idea how to lead people to Christ either. But I said, you handle the girls, I'll handle the boys. And we did this, and we led those kids in the simple faith prayer towards Jesus. It was amazing. I went home. There's a bigger picture of the story. I went home, and I just thanked the Lord. I was praying about this girl from America, whether she should become my wife. And I had limited time because they were only going to be there for 6 months. So I said, Lord, I just want you to know. It's not about my attraction to her. I think she's so cool and all that sort of stuff. I just want to know, is this your will or not? And as I'm spending that time in prayer, he shows me Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 to 6. That was my reading that day. And I was on my knees with my Bible, and I looked. I thank my God for your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And those words, partnership in the gospel, just sprang out of the page. It was like the Lord said, did you see? Becky was your partner in the gospel, wasn't she? She helped you with the gospel. She helped you to meet that need that I wanted you to meet and bring those children to Christ, didn't you? Yes, you helped her. You're partners in the gospel. And that sealed the deal. And here we are 38 years later, still partners in the gospel. Led hundreds to Christ, baptized 100 people, Cape Town. Went with Becky to Uganda, to Bosnia, to minister to people. What hangs in the balance? What hung in the balance for me, for my family, for my wife, for all the people that we've ministered to? If I hadn't just said, okay, Lord, I got 2 silly little stories. That's all I got, but I'm going to bring them. And that's all he wants you to bring. He doesn't want you to think about what the next person's going to bring. He's talking to you today. What is he asking you to do today? What is he asking you to do at this church today? You're part of it. What is he asking you to do in terms of serving in this church today? What has he put in your heart? What is he asking you to do in terms of giving? Daniel talked about the situation we're in, and we've got to meet some goals, and we've got to move forward with this church, and we need people to give. But our easiest thing is, Lord, the problem's way too big. I've done the computational maths. It doesn't work. But maybe there's somebody else who can do it. And the Lord is looking at each one of us today. Don't worry about somebody else. What are you going to do? Jesus is inviting you to meet the need that is right in front of you. And it's not all about this church. It could be about another organization. It could be about your family. It could be about your next door neighbor. It could be a myriad of things. But what he definitely wants for us to do is just to be servants. Bring what we have, not what we don't have. Start with what he puts in our hand. When we do what only we can do, Jesus is going to do what only he can do. And we're going to be amazed. And we're going to grow in our confidence in the Lord and in ourselves. Let's pray. Father in heaven, you're amazing. And you sent your son Jesus, who's equally amazing and who loves us, who does not leave us alone, comes after us, keeps running after us. There's no barriers that are unscalable for him in his pursuit of us. We're so grateful. We run, we want to be by ourselves, we want to be in our comfort zone, we want to take pleasures, we want to enjoy ourselves. And those are great, but you come running after us because you want our hearts. You want our hearts to be directed towards you, to walk with you as you fulfill your purposes in the world. And those are way greater and way bigger than we can ever imagine. And so I pray that you'll open our hearts, open our hands, open our wills, just help us to follow. Whatever you bring before us today, help us to say yes. Help us to have the courage to bring what we have, No matter how inadequate it may feel or how puny it may look, that's what you want. You just want what we can bring today. Help us to bring it and trust you for the outcome. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ, and we give glory. Amen.